Welcome to The Audible, presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Ralph Russo, here with my colleagues from The Athletic, Stuart Mandel and Bruce Feldman. Don't forget, every episode of the show is on YouTube now. Find us at Audible Show. We'll pick championship games later today. See how we're doing in the picks race. I think Bruce is still trailing, and Stu is still leading. But first, there is so much coaching news, so much coaching news that we got to get to, from Lane Kiffin to all the hires in the SEC. And Penn State's been a little quiet, Bruce. Kind of behind everybody else here as far as like making these hires. There's been Michigan State fired and hired a coach in 24 hours, and we're still waiting to hear from Penn State, a school with a job that opened up in October. So seems like there's a little movement here, but there also doesn't seem to be any rush for Penn State to make a hire, Bruce.
Right. So it's been up for 50 days. And as you noted about Penn State or Michigan State, the coach they ended up hiring, Pat Fitzgerald, was actually somebody that also interviewed with Pat Kraft for the Penn State vacancy. So it's kind of been conspicuously quiet as a lot of jobs have gotten filled and a lot of coaches have decided to stay where they're at. As we reported Monday night, Kalani Sitaki, who's done a terrific job at BYU, whose team, by the way, is playing in the Big Ten title game against Texas Tech later this week on Saturday. What did I say?
Big Ten. That's okay.
Freudian slip. So he has, from what we have been told from sources close to the process, he has emerged as a strong candidate. But we were told as of Monday night that there's nothing really imminent or close about this process wrapping up anytime soon. So, Ralph, give us some other pieces of this puzzle here.
Right. So it's been a slow process. I think, Terry Smith, the interim coach, sort of lobbied for the job. I would say made his loyalty to Joe Paterno known during this process to a certain degree, which is always helpful around Penn State. So it seems like he's in the mix. It's just you start connecting dots here too, Bruce. We know Brian Daboll is a person, former Giants coach, who Pat Kraft at least spoke to. There's some interest there, right? If Penn State wanted to hire Brian Daboll, they could do it today, yesterday, tomorrow, right? So I think you have to sort of, again, read the signals to connect the dots. If they haven't done that, then I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. There doesn't seem to be a lot of rush to get this done, even though signing day's in a couple of days. And Penn State at this point, I think, has 6 commitments, which I think ranks them something like 110th in the 247 rankings. A couple of guys whose name have been around Penn State, Eli Drinkwitz and Clark Lee, have signed extensions. But I will also say that our reporting sort of has suggested that those guys weren't necessarily really in on Penn State, or at least they didn't go far down the road on Penn State. So Pat Kraft has seemingly done a pretty good job at keeping his cards close to the vest here. And there's also this idea that if there's one school that's going to pull a rabbit out of its hat and really surprise us with a hire, Stu, it's Penn State. That's where we are. But we've also have more Lane Kiffin news and more of everything else. But Penn State seems to be the one place where there's they're still in a holding pattern while all this other activity is going on around us.
Well, since we're about to talk about a coach leaving his team before the playoff, I mean, isn't that what would happen here if Penn State decides to go for Sitaki? Are we going through this whole exercise again? He coaches BYU this weekend in the Big 12 championship game. If they beat Texas Tech, they're in. Even a possibility they were in, I would say small a possibility right now, in as an at-large team. So do we, the fact that they didn't want this to get out before the weekend, and they don't want to do anything before the conference championship game. But let's say he's in, they're in the playoff. Now what? We're in the same quagmire here. If you're BYU, you're not going to let him stay.
I think it's a little different, Stu, in this regard. BYU and Penn State are not rivals at all. Next to Mississippi State, LSU is the hated rival for Ole Miss, right? So I think it's a little different there, just like it's not the same thing necessarily with Jon Sumrall and or Eric Morris, having different jobs and potentially being in the playoff. What also makes this probably a little different too, Kalani, to be a head coach, football coach at BYU, you have to be LDS faith, and Kalani is that. And so I think it's different as opposed to Kalani being, let's say he was the head coach at Washington or somewhere else, but just maybe the connection through his faith to BYU might be a little different. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into that. We'll have to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I would also just add, I think what also makes it different is it hasn't happened yet, right? Like
it's a big distinction,
game, right? Like the game is still coming up, and we're waiting to see if Kalani, like maybe if they win the game and they're in the playoff, that's what makes him no longer a candidate.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what I'm thinking is that this was more likely to be that because of what you said, Bruce. Like there is a lot of deep ties there between coach and school. It's not Lane Kiffin is kind of a rent-a-guy every 4 or 5 years at this point. So it's a different situation, and you could see him saying what I think a lot of people wanted Kiffin to say, but wasn't going to happen, which is, sorry, guys, the timing's not right.
So, Stu, Lane did talk today. What was, he was introduced as LSU's new coach. It's still so bizarre that this is going on. You wrote that you think this could be the first time, it's interesting with the Kalani thing, that this could be the start of a new trend. We can get into that a little bit, but I also was wondering, like, what stood out from what Lane said today in his first public remarks as LSU coach?
I think the first thing is that he now officially has taken on Nick Saban's exact hand mannerisms. I noticed this a little bit in the interview with Marty Smith. He does this. I don't know if it's on camera.
Yeah,
he talks like this now, the way Saban did. Just your typical first press conference for a coach. I think one interesting moment was, he had mentioned in the Marty Smith interview that Pete Carroll basically told him, hey, this is what your dad would want you to do. And then he very carefully did not come out and say, Nick Saban told me this is what I should do. But he basically did. He said, I can't say exactly what he said, but I have a lot of respect for Coach Saban. And that's why I'm standing here today. And so that kind of builds on what we've been talking about the unusual, I guess, way that Game Day was treating this story and about whether Ole Miss should let him stay. And it's like, okay, so now you're telling me Nick Saban, who shares the same agent as Lane Kiffin, was on Game Day making it seem like it's kind of Ole Miss's moral obligation to let him stay with his players through the playoff, while also behind the scenes telling him, yeah, you should leave. You should go get that job. Ralph?
Yeah. It's the whole thing is very, very continues to be very frustrating. I'll give you guys a little insight of like sort of where this whole thing is. I got asked, I'm going to be on NPR tomorrow morning edition to talk about, they asked could you come on and talk about the Lane Kiffin thing? And of course, because they're a buttoned up shop, it's not just like us getting on the air and like riffing. They called to have somebody do a pre-interview. So they could, because they understand their listeners are not necessarily like our listeners, right? Or maybe they are, but they're not, many of them are not as in tuned to college football. And it was just interesting sort of explaining to this young woman who, admitted up front, he's like, I kind of got thrown into this. So let walk me through it. Like, what is going on here? And there was a lot of like, really? Wow. Like what? Like that seems so weird. Like, why would this happen? And so I only bring that up to say like, as much as this is interesting and odd and sort of flabbergasting to us, I think for people outside of the college football world who really don't follow it like we do, it's even more just stunning that like, if you just explain a simple like headline, coach leaving national championship contending team before its season is over to coach a rival that is not a national championship contender right now. The whole thing just doesn't compute.
Well, there was a part of the press conference, Stu, you listened to it too, right? where I'm pretty sure Kiffin referenced like being run off the road, right? Or something like he was going to the airport and like somebody tried to run them off the road, and it's not
cool,
like,
but it's also
it's a really like, it was a kind of a wild story that he said kind of in passing, and I don't know if I heard somebody follow up on it for more details. I think he was talking about like having a police officer he knew or something.
He had to call a police officer he knew to help him get to the airport. I tried to warn you guys about this, by the way, a couple weeks ago. If we have that sound handy, about I don't think you properly gave Lane Kiffin enough credit for the extent to which he can burn bridges.
Give me a % chance you think that actually could happen. Like, I just find it so hard to believe that a coach would just hit the ripcord and get out of there. I mean, Lane Kiffin, you know how bad of a look that would be? You just brought out...
You don't think this coach might do that? Like, not just a generic coach, but this coach. I mean, after what he did to Tennessee, after getting fired by Saban the week of the national championship game.
I'm sitting there watching that clip going, come on, Bruce, think about who we're talking about. Don't buy in.
Hey, yeah, look, you didn't buy in nearly as much as the people who made that documentary.
No. You know what's nuts? So I've seen a lot of reaction after, like, you know, Ralph and I felt like we were like, you can't put your head above water for a while, especially on Sunday. It was just kind of a flurry of stuff and into Monday. But at some point, I think I woke up early this morning. I was looking around and I saw like comments from Bill Cowher, you know, the former Steelers coach. I think he was on NFL Today or whatever CBS's NFL pregame show is. And he ripped Lane, and he came at it kind of where I think I was, because I've seen, you know, Cole Kubelik, who I think we all know and like, you know, former Auburn center and SEC Network guy. He said this morning what I feel like what I expected a lot of football people to say. It was like, you know, I was raised on finish, commitment, all that stuff. And so the naivete that was coming out of my mouth that, you know, like a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago, because I was just like, this is a big deal. And then fast forward, you guys, like one of the clips I saw early this morning or Monday morning was a clip that showed up on my timeline from Dan Orlovsky, apoplectic, that the calendar basically made Lane Kiffin do this. You know, and at one point he was like, I don't know if it's his
victim of the system.
I don't know if this might be his
dream job. He actually at one point said, what is Lane supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, at one point he was like referred to it might be his dream job. And I was thinking, no, that was 15 years ago when he left Tennessee to go to USC. That was kind of his dream job. And, you know, it went down the rabbit hole again. I think, you know, I like Dan. I think he does a great job on his NFL film breakdowns. But I thought he went down this kind of rabbit hole about the calendar and the NCAA being at fault on this. And as you said, Stu, he was like, what's Lane supposed to do? And I know, Ralph, we talked about this on our show probably like 2 weeks ago, but I think it's worth reiterating that, you know, you're going to wag your finger to people, and it's really pointing back at the coaches and the people, you know, he referred to them as idiots. I mean, that's the coaches doing largely.
Listen, there's a lot of blame about how we got to this calendar, but to think that the coaches had this hoisted upon them with nothing, with their, you know, as they were innocent bystanders, you know, just, oh no, I mean, coaches often do like to do this though, because we all talk to enough of them. You know, I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was going to happen when they did this. And often they're right. But again, this calendar was not hoisted upon them. They have ramped up of the speed at which almost everything goes in recruiting, the early signing day, early enrollments, you know, the transfer portal, as Stu pointed out in his column, being moved back so players don't have to leave before the playoff, but the coaches can still move during the playoff. So, you know, the whole calendar and the speeding up, again, the basic point is with the calendar is coaches have come to believe that they should have their entire team available to them on like January 20th, like whatever the first meeting in the second semester.
So you can have off-season workouts and get ready for spring football, and it's all a great development piece,
I
right?
need 80 players or 120 players, 80 players in front of me that are ready to go. And it doesn't have to be that way. That's not the way college football used to be.
You know how screwed up this is, Ralph? When you said that just now, when you said on January 20th, I thought you were referring to the national championship game. And I thought you were referring to the coaches of those teams wanting their whole team to still be there and have not gone in the portal, right?
And then there's that too.
Yeah. When I was fact checking for that column, I looked it up so they have the coaches convention every January. You guys have been there a lot. And there's a meeting on the last day, I think, where they bring in all the head coaches.
So it's the head coaches. So just so people know, it basically runs exactly the same time as the national title game. The national title game's on Monday. Most coaches roll in maybe Saturday or Sunday. And then the head coaches are usually the last coaches who are there in this convention city, whatever city it is, usually on like Tuesday or Wednesday.
So the Coaches Association itself does not have the authority to pass NCAA rules, but they will issue their recommendations. They'll hold a vote. What are we? And so in this past January, the coaches unanimously voted to do the single portal window in January. Like they endorsed that. So when Dan Orlovsky gets up there and says the calendar, these idiots, whoever came up with the calendar should be fired. Then you got to fire all the coaches. They helped come up with the calendar.
Right, because the point is, just to explain a little bit further, the Big Ten did suggest doing the portal in March. If you had a February signing day, which we still have, but nobody really uses it anymore because early signing day is now the signing day. If we still had a February signing day and a March or April-ish portal period, these schools would not be rushing to hire their coaches. They could literally say, okay, we'll wait until the playoff ends, and then we'll go hire our coach at the end of December or, early January. There used to be a time. When was Nick Saban hired? Do you guys remember when Nick Saban was hired?
Yeah, after the semifinal in January.
Yeah.
And then Kalen DeBoer was hired after. Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about way back in 2007.
At LSU? Yeah. At LSU in 2000?
At Alabama, Nick Saban was hired in January.
Kalen DeBoer was hired in January.
Right. So it doesn't have to be this way, but we have allowed college football to become this way. And it's not just the coaches, but they are not without blame here for how we got here. How we got here is not, again, something that was pushed on them. They are.
Do you remember why they wanted an early signing day? I do.
Oh, because they didn't want to babysit the kids.
They also didn't want to keep up on their recruits. They would have it was too much time spent chasing after each other. And here's the reality. Here's the reality is because they know they all can't help themselves. I mean, that's the reality. And it's fitting that here's we are as it bleeds into something else. And if you talk to any longtime coach or former head coach or current head coach who's being honest, they'll be like, yeah, I do that because I know that guy and that guy's going to be doing it. So you're constantly playing defense. That's how they live.
All right. Should we talk about something other than Lane, or you want to keep talking directly about Lane? Was there anything more about Lane that we need to cover before we hit some of these other coaches?
We should throw out an important question. We've talked so much about kind of the Ole Miss side of it, but the LSU side, right? There's a reason he's taking this job. He thinks he can win national championships there. Hasn't come out and said it, but clearly he didn't think he could at Ole Miss. And so I'll start with you, Bruce. Will Lane Kiffin win a national championship at LSU?
I think LSU will go 4 of 5. And that means I think the one head coach who won't win the national title of the 5 was Brian Kelly. I think Lane will win a national title there. I think there will be such buzz about him. All the stuff we're talking about and all the stuff that a lot of people that we know on social media are railing about, recruits don't listen to that. No. They might be listening to Kirk. They might be listening to Saban. I think that piece of it, you can get elite players there. And I think he'll put together a good staff. He's got a lot of support. All the stuff that we thought was gonna scare people away, that's not scaring the people who are going to be in the in the locker room away. And I don't know how many national titles he'll win, but I think he will win at least one, because the truth is, Nick Saban's not at Alabama, and it's harder for Kirby Smart to stockpile talent, right? So I just think that the SEC, while being deeper, is a little weaker at the top, and it's gettable. And I think Lane Kiffin will get it. Do you agree, Ralph?
Yeah, not necessarily just because Lane's so great. Like, I just think that LSU wins national championships as long as they have somebody who is like, you know what? You could convince me that if they had just left Brian Kelly alone there for a little while, he would have eventually won one too, because there's just so many good players down there, and the operation is like, I'm not saying the plane flies itself. And I do think Lane is a better fit than Kelly, so it will be an improvement as a head coach.
They were going backwards, Ralph. They were going. I mean, whether Scott Woodward was checking in on who they're recruiting.
Yeah, I don't want to get too bogged down in that, because it's more symbolically. Like, I just think that like LSU is a place that wins national championships. I think the only question about Lane and why it would fail is because Lane doesn't recruit at an elite level high school wise at Ole Miss. That's just not how they've done it at Ole Miss. Now you can say, well, that's because of that's an Ole Miss problem, right? That's a problem that will fix itself.
That's exactly why he's changing jobs
at LSU.
He feels like, I think he became the portal king almost out of necessity, because he knows he's not going to sign an Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State type recruiting class there, but he can at LSU. I got to squeeze my answer in here before we go to break, which is, I think he is capable of winning a national championship. I think he will take them deep into the playoffs. And then I think before he actually gets to the national championship, he'll leave for an NFL head coaching job. And LSU fans will try to run his car off the road.
He'll go to Alabama.
That's the inevitable next step. I think he gets restless and he wants the next thing. He wants to be loved, and then he wants to go get loved by somebody else. So that will be my kind of, fanfic right there. Let's go to break.
And we're back. Okay, I think we're done with Lane Kiffin. I'm sure we'll be talking more about Lane. He'll do something, and he'll force us to talk more about him, because that's just what Lane does, man. There was a lot of other coaches hired. Penn State is still waiting to hire a coach. LSU did its thing, and they made the big splash with Lane Kiffin. And we talked about on yesterday's show how there was sort of this domino effect throughout the SEC, where because Lane ended up at LSU, Jon Sumrall went to Florida, and Alex Golesh went to Auburn, and Arkansas landed Ryan Silverfield. Bob Chesney was hired today by UCLA. We had heard his name around Penn State. So that, again, when we're connecting dots, that would seem to be a signal to us that maybe he was not getting the Penn State job, and kind of understood he wasn't going to get the Penn State job. And really, just as we were going on the air here, Kentucky also hired a coach less than 24 hours after firing Mark Stoops, and moving on from Mark Stoops, Will Stein, the offensive coordinator from Oregon, is now the Kentucky coach. I feel like just saying, Stu, like, who do you like out of this? Like, what's a good hire? You like to grade the hires. Where do we go here?
Kentucky, right, was the surprise entrant into the market. We weren't sure they were going to spend all that money to fire the winningest coach of all time. And by the time they came on the market, 5 other SEC schools had changed coaches. What if Kentucky ends up with the best one? I really like Will Stein. He's obviously got ties there. I think the offense he runs at Oregon, I think probably gets taken for granted because they have had some form of explosive offense going back to Bellotti and Chip, but I think his is particularly unique, and they've done a great job with the quarterbacks there. So I think combination of that, and I feel like Florida, Auburn, and Arkansas fired their coaches in the middle of the season to just end up hiring like the obvious G5 guy. And by the way, 2 of those fan bases, Florida and Arkansas, aren't even happy with the G5 coach that their school hired. So I'll go Kentucky. What about you, Bruce?
I like that hire. Even though Stein was a Louisville quarterback and grew up there, I think both his parents went to Kentucky. I think they were like season ticket holders at one point. Like him a lot. It's just, I think we have to frame what is success for Will Stein, right? Like, right. Mark Stoops was the best coach they ever had there. They've had 4 double-digit win seasons in like 150 years of football, and he had 2 of them. If you get in the playoff one time at Kentucky, Will Stein was a grand slam home run. I think Will Stein will be an excellent coach. I've said this before in the podcast. I am a big believer in Jon Sumrall. I think the people who are not happy that they didn't get Lane Kiffin in Gainesville, when they get to know more about Jon Sumrall, I think they will come around. I like that hire. I thought, because he's from Alabama, I thought he would end up at Auburn at some point, but I think this may work out very well for Florida. So I don't know, Ralph, which is the one you like the most?
Yeah, this goes back to, remember that infamous show we did where I was like, I feel like the assessment of these coaches is all wrong. And I'm not going to get back into that point, but I do also find myself thinking like, yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens here. Like
we don't do that here, Ralph. I'm reminding you. You almost scared off all our audience.
No. Allow me to just make my point. I guess my overall point is like there's been a lot of swings and misses in terms that we thought would work out well, like Luke Fickell at Wisconsin.
Scott Frost.
And so my thing with Scott Frost, and this is why, so I like the Silverfield hire at Arkansas because he's got a longer track record of success at Memphis. And I always feel like I want to see somebody in a job for a long period of time and be good for a fair amount of time. Maybe not great, but is good for a long period of time. He's got some NFL experience. I look at Alex Golesh, who has done a really good job at USF. They were really way down. I mean, they had been in total dumpster fire and immediately got them pretty good. And then they had a breakout season this year. And now he bounces. My only worry with that is like sort of going back to the Scott Frost, Tom Herman thing. Is this a little too much too soon? You went from offensive coordinator at Tennessee, where I don't know if he was calling the plays.
He was calling it the last year, according to the guys there.
Yeah, the last year he was calling the plays. So I just wonder, like, okay, first year play caller, then he goes to USF, he fixes that situation up, and now, bam, you're at Auburn. Oof.
Which has its own challenges.
Which has a lot of challenges too, which is, again, not like kind of like with Frost, right? Like he stepped into a Nebraska situation, which that's a program with a lot of challenges. I mean, Auburn's biggest challenge is its rival is Alabama. So I don't know. Like, again, this is not me saying like that's good. That's a bad hire. I give it an F. But if I find myself being skeptical, it's simply that, like, is this another too much too soon hire? That would be my one caution with any of these guys who kind of go, who seem to be on a little bit of a rocket ship path to their new jobs. Sumrall is a little bit like that too, to a certain degree. He's got more of a track record than Golesh. He's done it at two schools, but I just wonder these guys who like very quickly hop into a good situation and then hop out of it. Do we know what we're getting into here?
The hit rate. So the the former AAC, or the conference formerly known as the AAC, now the American, has become a springboard, right, for lots and lots of coaches to Power 4 jobs. The hit rate is not very high, right? Josh Heupel, I would consider a hit.
But you mentioned he's a grand slam. That program was in rough shape before he got there.
Yeah, and meanwhile, you mentioned
Herman. You mentioned Herman came from that conference. Frost, Fickell.
Matt
Rule came from Temple, and he went to Baylor and did a really good job.
He did a good job at Baylor, but the rest has been spotty.
I don't want to hold the NFL against him because now it's a different
Jeff
deal.
Collins obviously was a big fail from Temple to he succeeded Rule and went to Georgia Tech. That did not work out.
I guess you got to give Mike Norvell credit and then give him not so much. I mean, before he had this current problem, he did pretty well coming from Memphis.
I didn't even know. Fuente was
Justin
in the
Fuente
American and he had one good year at Virginia Tech and then kind of bombed there. So,
and I don't even think. Look, there's not like there's something in the water at the clam bake at their kickoff event. It's not. They don't do that anymore.
No.
It's just like it just speaks to the this is a totally unscientific guesswork process, right? These guys that come from these schools, and even frankly, some that come from higher profile schools and that, a couple of them will pan out and a couple of them will be kind of and a couple of them will be bombs. And I think that's what we'll see from this class of 2026. in the SEC.
All right, Michigan State was the other school that made the hire today, though the news sort of broke yesterday. The days are blending together, folks. Again, they fired Jonathan Smith, and almost immediately after, there were reports by us and others that they had their guy lined up, and it was going to be Pat Fitzgerald, the former Northwestern coach. Fitz is back after a little bit of a scandal, though he came out on the other side of it feeling vindicated. Drove him away, Stu.
Yeah, so full disclosure, if people don't already realize, we were at school at the same time. I covered him at the student paper. I've known him for 30 years. I was once the hazing thing settled out the way it did, where basically Northwestern came out and said we were wrong. There was no evidence he did anything. Like, we apologize. That's not going to be the issue anymore. But I thought he might have to work his way back up, because the last couple of years at Northwestern were really bad. They had a great season in the COVID year in 2020. They went to the Big Ten title game. They finished number 10, and then 3-9. And then in his last season coaching, 1-11. So it's been surprising how that has just kind of been wiped from everybody's brains. Like, when people talk about him, and I'm not just specifically Michigan State, it's just like, what a great job he did over 17 years at Northwestern, which he did until a pretty bad drop-off at the end. I do think it can work at Michigan State, and I will say that I maybe wasn't quite in tune until the end with just how bad things had gotten for Jonathan Smith there. Like, it wasn't just that he had a bad record. The fans were just so upset. The donors, they were really disgusted, right? And so Jonathan Smith, I think, is a good coach. Maybe it just wasn't a good fit. West Coast guy, not a big personality. Well, here comes your prototypical Midwestern, Southside Chicago, blue collar guy who runs a very similar kind of smash mouth style as Mark D'Antonio did there with great success for many years. I could see him galvanizing the fan base, but Bruce, he has to hire well, especially his offensive coordinator. His offenses at Northwestern the last 5 or so years were just god awful, with some quarterbacks who probably shouldn't have had a Big Ten scholarship offer. I don't know. How are you feeling about it?
I'm curious to see how he does. I covered him a lot as a sideline reporter, and I felt like, he recruited a lot of really good kids. Obviously he was at a high academic place, and I felt like they were recruited to a blueprint. Hankwitz was a terrific defense coordinator for a long, long time.
Yeah, that's the slide began after he retired.
Yeah, and you're right. I think, sometimes guys like that, he's one of those guys that I feel like from inside the coaching profession, you never hear people like him. That's why, honestly, the story came out and was such a jolt to a lot of people way back when. But I also think, sometimes maybe those guys are too loyal to some of the hires they make. I don't know if that's exactly the case, but maybe some of the guys he was trying to make work didn't work out that great, and I think at Northwestern, for the most part, I think there were times where, I don't want to say you get a pass for having a year that's like a 4-8 or a 3-9, but I think he probably did to some degree, and because you knew there were some other really terrific years sprinkled in. At Michigan State, as Jonathan Smith found out, I don't think they're going to be that probably as patient.
Yeah, I think it's, hey, listen, Michigan State hiring a Big Ten linebacker, that feels right? We'll see if it works out, but it certainly feels right to have Fitz back in the Big Ten. All right, we're going to take a break. We are going to come back and we're going to pick all of the conference title games that are coming up this weekend. And we are back, and it's time to pick some games. Just quickly, the elephant in the room, the hat. It's just been... I tried to be professional on this podcast and not do the hat thing, but the last couple of days, it's just not working, man.
The dress code has really deteriorated here the later we go into the season.
I feel bad about it, but I just haven't gotten a chance to get a haircut. It's just been bad. So I apologize, viewers.
With the hat on, you look like Kyle Flood's little brother, by the way.
Oh boy. I mean, Kyle,
that's not an insult.
I am a year older than Kyle.
I see the face now, and I'm like, man, you look more like Kyle Flood than I thought.
I mean, we're just Queens guys. This is what Queens guys look like.
That's what they look like. Yeah.
This is just what Queens guys look like. Yeah, all right, let's pick some games. Before we do, the records going into, I don't know if it'll be the final regular season week, but we'll pick some bowl games, so maybe this could adjust, and playoff games. But I have made up a lot of ground on Stu here. Stu is still in first at 27-20. I am at 26-21. And Bruce, 20-28. It is what it is. Let's start with the Big Ten championship game. Number 1, Ohio State versus number 2, Indiana. It's the first time we've ever had a 1 versus 2 game AP rankings in the Big Ten championship game. The first Big Ten 1 versus 2 matchup since 2006, when Ohio State and Michigan played that famous game at the end of the season. It's a really big deal to have a 1-2 matchup, but Stu, it doesn't really feel like as big of a deal, but it should be a really good game.
Yeah. This is the first one where all the people in my comments over the years who are very like anti-bigger playoff, this is going to ruin the, like, you guys, this is the first time I'm like, you have a point. We have a 1 versus 2 game, and involving Indiana, this should be the biggest deal in the world. And like, it took us until the 30-something minute mark here to get to it. But I think just because there isn't like the huge buildup like there was to 2011 LSU Alabama or something, people are going to watch this game. I'm fascinated to see, like, can anybody beat Ohio State? And is Indiana going to, I mean, if you aren't already on their, bandwagon, if the Oregon game didn't prove enough, imagine if they win this game. So look, the Buckeyes have rolled all season. They've showed no weaknesses. I got to take the Buckeyes and the 4.5. Bruce, are you going to go with the Hoosiers?
It wouldn't shock me if Indiana won, but I'm picking Ohio State. By the way, one big thing that's a subplot in this game that we haven't touched on, it's probably going to decide the Heisman winner, I think, for a lot of people, between Sayin and Mendoza. Because the other 2 guys aren't, well, Ty Simpson's playing, but really no Pavia playing this weekend, no Love playing this weekend. So I think this is, I'm not saying Sayin's definitely going to win the Heisman, but I think he could get a big boost unless Mendoza goes after that defense and pulls an upset.
So
you're ruling Pavia out?
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not voting for him. I just think a lot of people are going to be focused on this game, and I don't think he's going to win. I wouldn't mind being wrong. We're not supposed to say who we're voting for. I know he's probably going to be on my ballot somewhere pretty high.
I would say this. I think if Mendoza beats Ohio State, that wins the Heisman for Mendoza, because Ohio State is a juggernaut right now. I would think if Sayin and Ohio State win the game, that creates a better chance for Pavia. I will take Ohio State to win the game. This is not an anti-Indiana pick. I just think Ohio State is a different beast. So Ohio State's -4.5. I'll take I'll lay the -4.5. In the SEC, another top 10 matchup between Georgia and Alabama for the SEC championship. They do this a lot over the last 6 or 7 years, and Alabama usually wins. Who you got? I'll go to Bruce this time. Who you got, Bruce?
Man, I was so close to saying Alabama, but man, they're so, I just don't trust their running game enough. I know I saw them beat in Athens, no less. I think it's hard to beat a team twice. Georgia did it to Texas last year, but I feel like there was just a bad matchup for the Longhorns. I'm gonna go with my gut on this and just say Kirby gets some revenge. Stu?
Yeah, Georgia's been playing so well lately, and this is kind of a go for broke kind of moment for them. A loss doesn't kill them, so Georgia covers and maybe wins by double digits.
Oh, that would make things very interesting, because I think that all of a sudden would raise the conversation about whether, and we can talk about this in tomorrow's show, but the idea of like, is Alabama going to stay in playoff position if they get beaten badly by Georgia? Line is -2.5, just to clarify if I hadn't said that from our friends at BetMGM. I'm going to take the Bulldogs as well. I just, the way these teams are trending suggests to me that Georgia is the better team right now, and it's only 2.5. So, hey, I mean, I can win by a field goal here and still cover. In the Big 12, the spread is much larger. Texas Tech is favored by 13.5 over Kalani Sitaki's BYU Cougars. We saw this game. We saw Georgia-Alabama early in the year, and it was a 3-point game won by Alabama. We saw this game, Texas Tech-BYU, earlier in the year, and Texas Tech rolled BYU. They won by about 20. I think it was 29-7 or something along those lines. I'll go to you first. Stu, who do you got in this one? Any chance the Cougars can flip the script?
That is a big number. Look, I've been like looking at playoff resumes a lot in the last 24 hours, and I've started to come to the opinion that BYU is being undervalued. They some of the games that they won that didn't seem like a big win at the time, like at Arizona, suddenly like, oh, that ended up being a win over a 9-3 team. And then you see this number and you're like, oh, so that's why the BYU is not ranked as high. Texas Tech wins, but BYU covers.
I'm going to agree with Stu. I feel pretty confident in Texas Tech, but that is such a big number. And I could see Bear Bachmeier and LJ Martin, and they got offensive weapons. I could see them keeping it close for a little while, but I just feel like right now, Baron Morton's playing at too high of a level. So I think maybe they'll win by 10, but I don't think they'll win by like 15 plus.
Yeah, I think first verse, second verse, same as the first, right? I think the Cougars are not a good matchup here. I think that Texas Tech has too many dudes up front, and I think we're going to see a similar game play out where Texas Tech wins. But I do agree with you, Stu. I do think that, like, if you kind of look a little deeper where BYU has been all season, it's a little more impressive than I think even I am giving them credit for.
They have a higher strength of record. We're going to talk about this lots tomorrow, but just a little tease. They have a higher strength of record than Oklahoma.
Yeah, but I'm going to take Texas Tech and lay those points. So at least we disagree on one game here. All right, in the ACC, man, it's a weird one. Duke, 7-5 Duke managed to make the ACC title game against Virginia. Virginia has been an amazing story. Tony Elliott has done a great job. We saw this game a few weeks ago, and Virginia rolled Duke. I'm not really sure why it would be that much different this time, but it's the ACC, and it's only a 3.5 point, and Virginia is only a 3.5 point favorite. Bruce, how about you, Bruce?
I am taking Duke. You know why? Because it would really screw the ACC, and I think the ACC has just stepped in it, and they can't get the toilet paper off.
I love
their
how
shoe.
you, on the one hand, will say, nobody's a bigger fan of Jim Phillips than me. I love that guy. I would carry his luggage for him. I would help him move. But I just think I really want to screw over the ACC as badly as possible.
I'm not saying I want to screw over the ACC. Yes, all those. I just think right now they have really bad mojo as a conference.
I'm taking Virginia. You know, this Duke team that is one win possibly from the playoff has the 118th ranked defense in the country. That is why they're 7-5. Chandler Morris shreds them. Virginia wins.
Yeah, Duke's offense is pretty good if it doesn't implode, right? Their biggest problem is a couple of the games, even like the Illinois game where they got beat by like 3 touchdowns. If you look like deeper in it, they were hanging with Illinois, going back and forth.
Fumbles. It's the Mensa turnovers, not just the picks, it's the fumbles.
Yeah. So if they can avoid that, I could see this becoming an entertaining game and a shootout. I, unlike Bruce, I'm going to wish well on the ACC. I do get what you're saying. They don't have good mojo, but I'm going to try to will them into a good outcome here. And I think Virginia would be a really cool story to cover within the playoff because they've been down for so long and they've had such a great season. So I'm going to wish cast that into existence and pick Virginia and give up the points. Now, there's a handful more conference title games. We're going to go through these rapid fire, folks. By the way, one addendum to Duke, Virginia, and we'll bring the Sun Belt game first. If Duke does win, and we can talk about this more when we talk playoff rankings, we've talked about it before. If James Madison wins the Sun Belt, they're favored by 22.5 over Troy. There is a very real chance James Madison could get into the playoff over the ACC champion. Who you guys got in the Sun Belt?
I got JMU to cover. I think that it's a big number. But I just think and it's funny because the times I've seen them, they haven't been that impressive. I've only seen them, watch closely a couple of games. I did watch a lot of the Washington State game, but I'm going Dukes. I'm going Dukes with a big number. Stu, are you with me?
I have a hard time. I don't know a thing about Troy. Not gonna lie, but I have a hard time saying in a conference championship game, yep, that team's definitely gonna win by 23. So without knowing a thing about them, Troy, I love you, Troy. Cover.
Yeah, I do. I know a little bit about Troy, and it's a little weird that they got here, frankly. Like the west side of the Sun Belt it has a lot of teams in flux, a lot of teams rebuilding.
The west side, not the best side.
They're the only ones left to have divisions.
Yeah, exactly. And it worked out good for Jared Parker, the former Notre Dame assistant, for getting them to this point. But I think James Madison's just a lot better, and Bob Chesney will send off Bob Chesney, maybe with even a playoff game. So I'll take James Madison and lay the 22.5, a little faster on the next ones. The game decided by robots, UNLV at Boise State in the Mountain West Championship game. Boise State is a 3.5-point favorite. Stu, who you got?
Boise State.
Bruce?
I'm going with Stu too. It's in Boise. They're tough to beat there. Ralph, are you making it all three of us?
No, I'll take the Fighting Dan Mullins. They play terrible defense, but they play very good offense. And I don't, Boise doesn't have a quarterback at this point. They've been really struggling.
I think Madison's coming back for this one.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
That gives me more confidence in Boise.
I'm going to still take the Fighting Dan Mullins just for the hell of it.
You like the name Anthony Calandria.
Anthony Calandria, quarterback chaos. We love that guy at UNLV. It makes for incredibly entertaining games. And again, the fact that these two teams are even in this because it was decided by computer formulas is a little nuts.
His old school's in a playoff game. He's in a playoff game. It's good.
UNLV went 0-2 against the three teams that were involved in the playoff tiebreaker and made it to the championship game.
I think something like that happened in the MAC too. Miami was in a three-way tie with two teams that lost to and won the tiebreaker.
So let's go to the MAC. Miami of Ohio is a 2.5-point dog to Western Michigan. Yes, Toledo got squeezed out here, even though they had the better records head-to-head. Who do you got, Bruce, in the MAC championship?
So is this a matchup between former Notre Dame assistants?
It is. It's Lance Taylor on one side and Chuck Martin on the other. Chuck Martin, who's become like the Frank Solich of Miami of Ohio.
I'm going to go with Lance Taylor. And I have a weak reason, just because I think I knew more about Kyron from Lance Taylor giving me extensive material on him, and I'm loyal to him. So I'm going to stay. Gotcha. So I'm going to stay with Lance Taylor's team.
This is some real expert analysis we're giving on these on these games. I think I'm going to just be a little bit different and pick Miami. Why not? The MAC title game is often upsets, so I'll go Miami.
Yeah, I'll go with Miami and Chuck Martin's team too. Honestly, I watch a fair amount of action, but I was shocked when I noticed that Western Michigan was actually in position to get to the MAC championship game. It definitely slipped by me this year. Last one is a game, or excuse me, second to last one. We have two
left, yeah.
Yeah, second to last one is we'll go to Conference USA. Kennesaw State with Jerry Mack, first-year coach, having a great year. They were terrible last year, and he's done a tremendous job. Is a 2.5-point favorite against another first-year coach, Charles Kelly at Jacksonville State, who did a nice job replacing Rich Rod. Conference USA, folks, anything can happen in Conference USA. So, Stu, who do you got here?
I'm going to go with that, kind of rags to riches story there at Kansas State.
I'm going to go with them too, but I'm a little hesitant because I watched a lot of their game. Liberty's way down this year. I think they're they went 4-8. They were playing their third string quarterback. And they barely survived in, I think, double overtime or overtime. But I'm going to go with Kennesaw State.
Yeah, I feel like I've just been on this story a little bit, and I I shouted out Jerry Mack early in the season. So we'll go with the Owls to win Conference USA in the second year they've been in Conference USA. The last one is a big one because it probably does decide a playoff spot. In the American, it is North Texas favored by -2.5. I was a little surprised by it. Favored by 2.5. At Tulane. This is two lame duck coaches. Eric Morris from North Texas will be the Oklahoma State coach in a few weeks. Tulane's Jon Sumrall will be the Florida coach in a couple of weeks. Let's start with Bruce here. Who you got?
I am going to go with North Texas. I think I have a little more faith in the Mean Green offense and Drew Mestamaker and what Eric Morris does there than Tulane. I don't feel that confident about it, but I will go with the Mean Green. Stu?
I'm very confident in the Mean Green, and I frankly don't understand why they haven't even made the committee rankings yet as of this recording. Tulane has, they've had more recent success. They are considered, one of the more talented teams in that conference. But guys, North Texas is putting up 50 something points like every week.
Yeah.
They've scored 50 plus points in 5 of their last 6 games. They're a machine. They've got the quarterback. They're going to the playoff.
Yeah, I'm going to get a clean sweep here. I think you're right. The one game where they glitched out was against USF, and they had a whole bunch of turnovers. It's not like USF stopped them from moving the ball. So yeah, we'll make it a clean sweep here, and we'll send the Mean Green to the playoff as the 12 seed, maybe the 11 seed, ahead of Duke or ahead of James Madison. Who knows? By the way, that's a rags to riches story. Like when the American, had to replace all those teams, and North Texas was one of them. They hadn't done anything. Even the conference was like, well, they have a nice media market, so the fact that they're on the brink of doing this would be pretty cool. Yeah, they bet on North Texas, and North Texas has finally come. It was always a program with some potential, and now it seems to have come true. That is our show for today. Every episode of The Audible can be found at YouTube at Audible Show. We'll be back after the rankings. We're going to do a live show after the college football playoff rankings. Come join us on YouTube at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Stu and Bruce time. We're going to do a recap of the penultimate college football rankings. We may even find out who's going to be in the playoff to a certain degree. You can kind of get an idea for those penultimate rankings. Also, we get to use the word penultimate. After that, we'll be back on Thursday for a normal show with the mailbag. Send your email and your questions to theaudiblepod@gmail.com, and we will see you then.